So I began thinking about weather, and I began thinking about weather in England to do for this piece, and Rebecca had suggested that I go to the Met Office and start rummaging through the archives there. But time was kind of tight, and she came up with these weather reports in the 1920s, and she gave me, they hadn't been digitized, but somehow she got them digitized, and they were beautiful monthly weather reports for the entire year. And so I kind of began working with those weather reports, transcribing those. But what ended up happening was, at the end of that transcription process, I began to want something more personal and something a little bit more eccentric. And so I began doing an internet search and came across these weather diaries. The most personal and the most eccentric weather diaries that were ever written in England were from this guy named Thomas Appletree, who kept a weather diary in 1703, and that's what I'm going to be reading from today. And basically the story is that this guy went to Oxford for a couple of years, and then it ended up back studying a little bit of classics and a little bit of law, and then ended up back on the family farm in Worcestershire. And they don't really know much about him other than he was a bachelor and living on the farm, and began in January 1st, 1703 to keep this amazing weather diary. Now you have to understand that meteorology at this time hadn't been standardized and codified in ways that it is today. This guy had absolutely no meteorological instruments. There was no temperature, there was no barometer, there was no standardization. So you have this guy in his backyard on the family estate, just every day kind of feeling the weather and kind of feeling it through his body and feeling it through his mind. And so what you get is a piece of subjective writing and a piece of very emotional writing. And the weather, you know, today is, of course, the most objective thing in the world. You know, you shouldn't put any of yourself into it. But this guy begins, because he's very lonely, he's single, he begins to map the weather on his own psyche. And he begins to get very tied in with the different moods. And a little of that you'll see here. There are certain parts of the piece that are very kind of emotional in that way, and there's some of that. He was a bachelor also, and he was never married, so he begins kind of seeing clouds as breasts laden with milk, and it pours down on the hungry plants. And so there's all this kind of transferal of his body mapping onto the actual weather itself. So it's really a very strange and subjective and very beautiful text, and you just have to remember that nobody had really tried this before. I mean, he had no precedence. There was no precedence for weather. So finally, I'm going to just be reading the spring, and because it starts March 1st, I'm actually going to be reading March 1st. Depending on time, I'll get through at least to June 21st, beginning of summer, and perhaps a little bit into July. It should go a little bit into July. March 4th. Frost gone, clouded, evening fair and delicate. Stars, night, wind southwest, little sun but by fits. Close, clouds and shady, yet somewhat lightsome and springing, seminal, mild, impregnated air. First butterfly I saw today, flying in the morn air. Wind brisk, not fierce or cold, but temperate and fine, and came over from Malvern, or rather more to the west, between that and Auberley, in the subsidence intercepted betwixt those hills, and was veered more west since yesterday pretty much. It thawed all day yesterday, and weather broke and melted. March 5th. Delicate, fair, little frost, hot, cooling breezes northwest. Noon blew up white clouds, evening curious and fragrant. March 6th. More cool and clouded, fresh fragrant shower of 5 to about 7. Curious evening, serene and lovely and august, with breezes wind west. March 7th. Morn almost absolutely serene, only a few clouds northeast, curious, bright, orient, wind, west, sun, and ravishing, heavenly calm. Noon more pleasing, shaded and overcast, and sunset almost visible in red. only a small horizontal cloud interposed, evening sweet and noble. March 8th. Shade of solemn and serene clouds, little full of sun but exceeding calm, wind west and quiet, and Pacific hot and dry, air more yielding in signs of rain or drops, night dark and close. I made these notes but cursory, and cannot be positive as to the wind, but all this dry time it stood most west or west-north at Kidderminster. And today I think it veered to the west-south and probably may introduce a little wet. March 9th. Clouded morn, close driving for rain, wind southwest. Noon clear and sun splendid and no rain at all. Bright and pleasant, and about 11 it took up. Night clear and stars. March 10th. Fair white clouds hot and fine, cooling evening gales, wind west and north. All day was fair and almost even hot, and I observed odd figures of white clouds like combs, others as palm branches or foxes' tails, some hairy, some shaggy, of a most delicate white and of vast height. And I could perceive two lower tiers or orders of swimming clouds, some snowy, pure, almost glistening, metalline and argent clouds were like Holland rags, or clouts, or the buck flocks, or remnants of flax or cotton rolls on the limb of a white cloud. I saw a faint edge of red and yellow like the embryo of a rainbow. Night was clouded and heavy, no stars appeared.